Yo, what's up, boys? So a new patch dropped today, 10.16. I'll be running you through some of the changes that will be affecting the mid lane. This is the overview for 10.16. You can see specifically affecting the mid lane is nerfs to Karma, Karthus, Nocturne, Syndra, and Set. And then buffs to Akali, Lucian, Morgana, Nico, Trist, Veigar, Yasuo, and Ziggs. It was meant to be a buff to Eve for a lane flex or something, but I don't believe Eve is going to make her way to the mid lane. She can't really survive a laning phase. The best bit is when she's invisible and clearing jungle, the enemy doesn't know where you are. If you're not showing mid lane, it's going to be pretty obvious you're roaming or something. So at the end of the day, I think it's not going to affect the mid lane meta. Big system change is a pretty big nerf to Nimbus Cloak, which will affect a lot of champions. It's still going to be probably the rune for choice for a lot of these champions who like to abuse their mobility, but just a small thing you got to think about. And then coming across to the actual tier list now, you can see my God tier, my S tiers. It's pretty stable, this whole tier list. Slight changes, champions come up and move a little bit, but it's very solid. You don't really get a huge shift in the meta without massive changes, and it just simply hasn't been enough to really shift these God tiers away. The biggest change, I guess, I've put Sylas up and Diana down. I think that Sylas right now, there's a specific way, there's a fleet footwork Sylas with Qmax. You go GLP into things like Hourglass, Leandry's Death Cap. It's a very burst heavy Sylas, and I think it's very strong on this patch. With champions like the Galio and the Twisted Fate getting picked so often at the moment, Sylas can of course just steal their globals away, and you're simply a better Galio, a better TF with a little bit more front-loaded damage. So you still have the Nocturne. Nocturne was nerfed this patch specifically to the mid lane. They don't like how strong Nocturne is in the mid lane, so the passive is going to be coming up a lot less often. I think it's 4 seconds flat off of his passive, which is of course the big AoE auto that's going to be healing you. So you will struggle more so into matchups where you're getting poked down a lot. Things like that Orianna, you will struggle into, but Nocturne is still super strong, okay guys? Scaling into the later stages of the game with lethal tempo if you're running it, he's still going to be super incredible for those one-shots in the side lane. He's going to counter a lot of these mages. You can play it perfectly into things like the Twisted Fate, Cassio. I like him even into the Galio. He works so well as, I guess, a counter to a lot of these immobile champions. Galio, really strong. Starting to get played more and more in pro play. He'll still get played a shit ton on this patch. I think Galio is super underrated. I don't see enough of him. I definitely think people should start playing him more. Fizz, don't really need to say much about Fizz. I put a review out. I put a couple of Fizz reviews out now that you guys can watch to learn it and pick it up. Fizz is just super strong. Really good snowball champion at the moment. He does well into things like that Twisted Fate. He does well into things like that Orianna. You can catch them off guard with an ultimate, and they're kind of stuck. They're going to get one shot. For Fizz and solo queue, you're roaming around the map diving. It's perfect. My OP pick of the patch is actually Orianna. Syndra got a slight nerf again this patch, and I just think that Orianna is the best blind pick at the moment. She's so safe. She has a large variety of builds where you can go the GLP, you can go the Ludens, you can go the Seraphs. There's a lot of things you can do with Orianna that you can't really do on other champions at the moment, so that's why she's my God tier and S tier pick for mid lane at the moment. I think that there's definitely chances that the other champions are stronger in different comps, but overall, Orianna is faring very well and is the best control mage at the moment. Twisted Fate, look, the Nimbus Cloak and the Unsealed Spellbook nerfs have definitely affected Twisted Fate, but he's still a great pick in the mid lane. I'd recommend a Sylas ban. Sylas does very well into Twisted Fate. You steal his ultimate, you can hard engage onto him. Probably look to ban that and then pick the Twisted Fate. You can usually try and counter the Fizz with itemization, but the Sylas you can't. It's really hard to do. Maybe go Banshees or something. I don't know. It's super hard to get that the counter off into the Sylas. Echo, he's performing very well. I think Echo, look, he's probably better jungle still, but I still like him in the mid lane. A lot of players, they like to counter the champions like the Syndra. You can play him into things like the Victor, the Zoe he does pretty well into. But overall, Echo's the best. Not the best, but he's very good because he can be flexed. The enemy doesn't know if it is a mid or a jungle Echo, and that just helps you out to get countered a lot less. Bans for Echo, probably the Kassadin, in all honesty. A lot of people will try and counter you with that champion. And capping it all off is the Cassiopeia, still doing very well. Banned the Orianna. The Syndra got nerfed this patch as well, which is going to be helping out. Syndra is probably the biggest counter to Cassio, followed by something like the Orianna. So just ban the Orianna. You can pick Cassio whenever you want. You should be able to do fine. And that caps off for my S tier picks, guys. It's pretty stock standard. Not much has changed in that tier. Moving down to some of my A tier picks now. I think I've shifted Diana down to A tier. I still think she's really good, but I think those S tiers of the Galio and the Nocturne is a little bit better if you're looking for a simple champion to play. Diana is still super good into immobile mages, and she does really well into things like Yasuo as well. So these short range champions you can survive on Diana. Still a super good pick, but just falling off a little bit in my opinion in the meta. Nunu mid, a little bit of a flavor of the month was for the last patch, Nunu mid. I still think he performs very well. I think you really want to synergize him with a jungler that you can take over the game and start looking for that objective control with Nunu's Q and look to set up ganks into things like the Syndra, who doesn't have an escape route. If you burn her flash, she is going to die. So the first champion I want to talk about that has been changed is Neeko. She saw a buff to her Q damage. At the end of the day, this helps Neeko out a lot early on. It's going to allow you for a lot more poke in lane. I think Neeko's been slightly underrated for a while now. That Glacial setup where you go full AP. I think it's like GLP Spooky Ghosts into Hourglass Deathcap, a build like that, performs very well. I think Neeko mid and top might see some play this patch, but at the end of the day, I think there's a couple of better picks. If you're looking for like a control mage, that Orianna is always going to be there. Sylas can do very well and steal the ultimate, get into a team fight. You got to be very careful when picking it. But overall, I think Neeko probably slightly buffed this patch. It's going to help her kid out a bit to survive into some of these stronger picks. Syndra got a nerf to her late stage of her Q, so she's losing 20 base damage later on. Syndra, in my opinion, is not that good in solo queue. In pro play, this nerf is specifically for Syndra in pro play. They're sick of players like Knight just completely taking over the game with this pick, so they're going to nerf it even more. Syndra is only at like a 47% win rate at the moment, and it's going to continually go down as these other champions get stronger. So look, Syndra, it's strong, but I think Cassio, Orianna are better mages. Even Victor, I would put slightly above Syndra at the moment. The nerfs are specifically to pro play, and it's going to indirectly hurt, it's going to directly hurt her solo queue performance. For the rest of my A tiers, it's pretty self-explanatory. Lissandra is a good counter pick to things like the Fizz, the Nocturne. One-tricking champions like Aurelion, Katarina, Zed are all going to net you very good results. The learning curve for these champions is pretty high. I think the win rates in the first 25 games is like 40% or something ridiculous. But as you get into those 100+ games, these champions' curves start pushing up above 50% win rate. So if you want to put the time in and learn these champions, it's definitely worthwhile. Zoe is a pretty good counter pick to things like the Cassio. You can play him into things like the Galio. Champions you can outrange and safely burst and then come back. But you got to be careful when picking him. A lot of these champions can counter Zoe hard. Like the Kassadin, the Diana, the Fizz, the Nocturne. A lot of these all-in champions do very well. Now moving down to the B tiers, a champion that got a pretty big buff is Tristana. Her E now gets increased damage. I think it gets 1% increased damage for every 3% crit, up to 33%. So like maxing out at 90% crit, if my maths is right, you get an extra 33% damage on your E. Yes, this is a pretty big buff to Tristana. It will help Tristana mid out a lot. You can look for those pokes, you can look for those platings in the tower. But you gotta be careful when picking Tristana. A lot of these champions fare a lot better than her. She's pretty high risk, high reward. You jump in, you get the solo kill, you get the plates. But it also means, I guess for Tristana mid, you can't freeze the waves. You're always shoving because of that passive on the E. And it's just gonna allow you to be ganked pretty often. Yes, you have the W, but you still gotta be very careful, okay guys? Tristana's strong. Stronger than she was, but she's not A or S tier. She's a bit of a niche pick and can be used as counters to things like the Orianna, who don't really have escape routes. Probably good into Galio as well, come to think of it. Vega got a buff, he got a 2 base MR buff. With base MR, it kind of helps him out early game. As the game progresses, it becomes more and more irrelevant. 2 base MR, you know, it's going to help him maybe survive a little bit of burst from things like the Syndra and the Zoe, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, Vega will still struggle into the matchups like that Kassadin, like that Fizz, even like that Nocturne and Sylas. Like champions do very well into them. Tenacity just hard counters them, going Mercs. So Veigar, slight buff. It's not going to change. It might change its win rate by like 0.02% or something ridiculously small. Another champion that got a bit of a buff is the Lucian mid. Slight buff to his damage on the Q. 10 base. It's going to help him bully out matchups like the Orianna, the Kassadin, the Galio that he likes to get picked into. Blind pick Lucian, wouldn't really recommend it. Yes, it can be played top and bot as a flex, but in solo queue, you don't want to be swapping with some randoms. He also got an ultimate buff. It's only slight. It's going to help him get solo kills and finish people off, but at the end of the day, Lucian, very high skill cap champion. A lot of players don't know how to play him like post 10 minutes. Yeah, you can auto attack in lane, get a small CS lead, but it's from what you do at that 10 to 25 minute stage that players struggle with and why his win rate is so low in the mid lane. Moving across, you got the Yasuo buff. He has a late game Yasuo buff at the moment, so level 1 ultimate hasn't been changed. Level 2 ultimate got slight damage. Level 3 ultimate buff was actually quite a lot. That's level 16 though, so mid lane Yasuo will be buffs more than the bot lane Yasuo because you're getting levels faster. But Yasuo, at the end of the day, it's an OTP champion. You got to put 100 plus games in. He fares well when you have that learning curve. You've put that time and effort in to learn the champions and the matchups. But at the end of the day, Yasuo probably a B tier pick. A lot of these S and A tier picks do great into the Yasuo mid, so you got to be pretty careful when you pick him. Akali saw a slight change this patch, so 5 base damage buff on the Q, and then changed her E from physical to magic damage. So this is gonna actually buff late game Akali quite a lot. Champions have very high armor scaling per level, so as the game progresses, Akali will get stronger and stronger, while maybe in the early game she'll be slightly weaker. Probably the 5 base Q will just cancel out that slight nerf to the E. But as the game progresses, she'll get stronger and stronger as people don't really have that good magic resist scaling in their kits. So when you get things like the Sorks and the Oblivion Orb for flat pen, Akali will be even stronger in the later stages of the game. So yes, it is a slight buff to Akali mid. At the end of the day, you need to be very proficient at Akali to make her work. She's super high skill capped, more so for pro play. I think she will be picked more often. Players like, is it Abadage? I saw him play a very nice Akali on the weekend in the LEC. The champion will start getting picked a little bit more often in pro play. In solo queue, at the end of the day, I need you guys to put 50 plus Akali games in before you start playing it in ranked, which I know a lot of people don't really want to do. So there's that. Moving down to my C tiers, the last changes I'll talk about. Ziggs buff. Pretty big Ziggs buff. I think that Ziggs, he's just not that good in the mid lane. He doesn't have good matchups at all. I think Ziggs bot with Bard. Very potent. So what you like to do, especially in pro play, you want to drop bot lane tower. So let's say your jungler gets a herald, he comes bot. You can drop that bot lane tower so fast. And then once you have the tower on the plates, you shift your bot lane to the mid lane and shift your mid laner to a side lane to get solo farm. Then you can start working away at the mid lane tower as well with Ziggs. So I think Ziggs bot will be better than Ziggs mid. Maybe he'll see some slight play and he will definitely get a slight win rate increase. But I don't think it's enough to justify picking Ziggs mid over something like Orianna, like the Victor, Syndra, Zoe, Cassio. Why would you play Ziggs? I can't justify it at all. Any other changes I really want to talk about? Set got slight nerfs. Set mid's not that great. Karma slight nerfs. They don't want Karma mid top appearing, which is fair enough. Gragas buffs for mid lane wasn't enough. He's better jungler, but still not picked often enough. Karthus got nerfed this patch, more so for the jungle. Karthus jungle is very strong at the moment. Mid lane, it's kind of the same like ordeal as the Ziggs. Like you just have better mages to pick. Kog'Maw, it's a good counter pick. It was flavor of the month last patch with the Nunu. It's a good counter pick to control mages, but other than that, it's pretty int heavy. I think they were playing at bot lane a little bit with things like Thresh and Tarm. But I still think, like, if you want an AP bot, pick, like, Talia, pick Syndra. Even the Orianna will do great bot lane, rather than picking that Kog'Maw, who's really immobile and super passive in the early game. So that's it for my tier list, guys. Hope you've learned something. Hope it's going to help you guys climb on the patch. And until next time, I'll catch you all later. Peace.